Okay, I've done a few videos on these on the DOV2, but I thought I'd just quickly talk through the sound connection for the DOV2. We're running the sound on a separate system. I use this system quite a lot on RC. It's fairly simple. All it does is it reads the switches from the receiver, and once it's read the switches, it converts those switches onto triggers effectively through the nano, and then triggers some sounds. But the connections. So first of all, power. We are using a UBEC to power the whole 5-volt thing. And then you're taking 5 volts from that receiver, so 5 volts from that UBEC, and you're using that to power the Arduino Nano. So that's the red line. So you take your 5 volt, which is your middle line on your receiver, and your ground, which is your brown cabling, and you pull that into your voltage in and your ground on your Arduino, which powers your Arduino, and then you continue that onto from 5 volts out of the Arduino into the DF player and ground into the DF player mini. So what you've then got is a common 5 volts that power both the Arduino Nano and the DF player, and a ground to Arduino Nano and DF player. How you do that, you can either create a cable where you've got them, where you've just got a splitter cable, or you can crimp them together however you wish. But effectively, that's your system then powered. The next thing you want to start to look at is the connection. Now, what we're connecting is on direct serial, which means we've got the TX from the Arduino Nano going to the RX on the DF Player Mini, and the RX on the Arduino Nano to the TX on the DF Player Mini. Now you'll see on the diagram there's a 1 ohm resistor. What I'd suggest is have a look at connecting the Arduino Nano to a DF player and see what the recommendations are around that 1 ohm resistor. The reason that 1 ohm resistor is in there is the DF player is a little bit sensitive sometimes to sound, sometimes to voltage, and so the 1 ohm can actually get rid of some of you may get a crackling sound and some background sound. So again, 1 ohm resistor. It's showing it on this one from the RX from the Nano to the TX to the DF player. Typically, it can also go on the TX to the RX. So it can go on the other line as well. As I said, have a look online, and it is optional. It will work without, but you tend to get a little bit of noise on the line. So if you're getting noise or you're getting crackles and pops and things like that, you can try the 1 ohm resistor on either a TX and RX. It is interchangeable. You can take them off or on. You won't damage the system by actually doing that. Obviously, you'll need an SD card, a mini SD card with the sounds actually on the DF player, and the sounds are in the folder to get that up and running and working. And that's pretty much then your powered system working. Now, if you want to test your DF player once you've powered everything up and you've connected your speakers and you've got a memory card in there, if you look on the diagram at the bottom there, you've got ground, you've got IO_1 and IO_2. If you short ground to IO_1 or short ground to IO_2, it will actually trigger the sounds. It's a bit like a button that makes it go forward or goes backward. So you can use that as a manual test to make sure that the power's working, the card's being read, and the speakers are up and running. Before then you start to diagnose the RX and TX elements of this. Okay. Another thing to watch out is when you're uploading sketches to the Arduino Nano, disconnect your TX and RX. The TX and RX actually use the same interface as the USB does on the Nano, so you can only have one or the other connected, otherwise you may interfere when you're uploading the sketch. So what you do is build your wiring, disconnect the TX and RX, upload your code, and then reconnect your TX and RX. If you've loaded the code up correctly and everything's working, when you first power it on, it should play the first sound that it gets in the DF Player Mini, and that I tend to use a battery charged as the first sound. The way that the sounds work on the DF Player Mini is it doesn't matter what the file names are. It's the order in which you copy them across. So the first file you copy across is always sound 1, and then it goes 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. The next thing to connect then is the signal cables. Now the signal cables are connected to pins 9, 10, 11 and 12. And they go from channels 7, 8, 9 and 10. So on your receiver, you've got channels 7 to 10, and you don't actually need to run the full 3 pins. You just need the signal cable. So that's just the top cable, the yellow cable, the cable at the end that's nearest the label. It's just that connector from channel 7, 8, 9, and 10, and they goes to pins 9, 10, 11, and 12 on the Arduino Nano. And what the code does is it looks at those pins for changes, and when those change, it will actually trigger sounds. Now the channel 7, which is which I always assign to the furthest or to the nearest switch on your Fly Sky, which is switch A. So channel 7, switch A. When that's flicked up and down, that's what triggers the sound. So that triggers the sound. Now the other switches, so you've got channel 8, which is switch B, channel 9, which is switch C, and you've got channel 10, which is switch D. Now what they do is they put the DO into different states. So if you just leave all of the switches up and flick 7 up and down, it'll trigger the sound. And it'll trigger the default sound I tend to do, like the hello. And then if you switch B down and trigger the sound, it will then do a different bank of sounds. So you can have happy sounds, you can have sad sounds, and you can have squeaky wheel sounds, which is what I tend to do. And then the switch C, which is the one that has 2 positions, gives you again two kind of moods of DO. So what you've really got is 4 moods of DO. Switch B, which is the one that triggers one mood. You've got C, which triggers 2 moods, and then you've got D, which triggers the last mood. If you switch them on, what it does, it'll change the moods, and then 7 will just trigger the sound. It's kind of a quick and dirty and easy way of getting sound triggered without having full control. There is other ways of doing it, but if you look through the code, what you'll see is that it's looking to see where those switches are, and then it's changing the mode and triggering the sound accordingly. So that's effectively the main sound system for DO. Fault finding on the sound, some of the issues that you may probably raise with these. The first thing I would do is connect power all the way through and make sure power's there. You'll see a light on the Arduino Nano. You will not see a light on the DF Player Mini. The only time you'll see a light is when it's playing. So if you think you've got power through but it's not playing any sound, you can short that ground to IO_1, and that will manually trigger a sound. If you manually get a sound at that point, you know that the card's in, you know that the cables are connected and the speaker's connected. So you pretty much know then that all of that DF player is working. If you don't get a sound, what I would then start to do is look at power. Get a meter out and make sure that you're getting voltage and power in there. Check to see that the card's installed correctly and you've got sound files on the card and the speakers are connected up correctly. So that's the first thing to do, is power. Can you trigger it manually through a DF thingy? Then when you power it up, does it play that first sound? If it plays the first sound, it means your serial connection is correct. That's your TX to RX and RX to TX. If it doesn't play a sound at that point, there's a couple of things you can try. Try switching the 1 ohm resistor around or taking it out completely. You won't damage it by it not being in there, but play around with that 1 ohm resistor and have a little bit of a look online to see how that works. As I said with mine, I think I end up having just one 1 ohm resistor as it shows there. But you can have it. It does work perfectly well with none, because there's a couple of versions of the Nano. So if you've got sound playing, that means when you first fire it up, it means that the serial connector is going. If you haven't, it means it's something to do with serial connector. Play around your TX and RX. The other thing that you can do is swap your TX and RX on one side. You won't damage it by just playing around with those TX and RXs and swapping them around. So your TX to RX, RX to TX, etc., or swapping the 1 ohm resistor around until you can actually try to get it to trigger. If it doesn't trigger at all, there is a fallback where you can use software serial, but it does involve some code on there. But have a play around with that. You can also try a different nano if you've got different types of nanos. There's ones that have got little chips and ones that have got bigger chips. I always found that the ones with the smaller chips in the middle actually work better with the DF Player Mini, just from experience. If you've then got all of that working, but what happens is your RC's not actually triggering, so it's playing the sound when you first fire it up, but you can't get it to trigger the sounds. Check your channels. That's where you bound your switch A, B, C, D, and E to channels 7, 8, 9, and 10, and also then check the pins. And check all the switches. If you find that a switch other than switch A is triggering the sound, then it's a matter of swapping the cables around until you actually got the right connections, so that switch 7 triggers the sound. And then likewise, you can start to just diagnose by seeing what sort of behaviour you get on each of the switches. But effectively, it's you can do that through trial and error, or you can have a read through the code, because in the code it'll show you what pins we're actually using, and it shows you where the readings are for each of those, so you can do. But hopefully that's a little bit more information on the DF player. Sorry, on the DOV2 sound system. Just want to talk through that and some of the pitfalls. There is some other videos on the YouTube channel, just stepping through the code, etc. So all of those are worthwhile watching for DO.